Imagine being accused of conspiracy, tortured on the rack, and exiled from the only career you ever knew. That was Niccolò Machiavelli in 1513. And what did he do next? He sat down and wrote a book so explosive, so politically radioactive, that it would echo through the halls of power for centuries: The Prince. He had no army, no throne, no public voice, but he had insight. And insight, when sharpened into words, cuts deeper than swords. The manuscript wasn't just theory, it was a provocation. A man thrown out of politics writing a how-to manual on how to win at politics. That's not bitterness. That's strategy forged in fire. Now here's what you probably didn't expect. Machiavelli never actually said the ends justify the means. That phrase, often stamped on his reputation like a scarlet letter, was a later distortion. What he did say was more chilling and more honest. He observed that in politics, people care more about results than morality. A ruler can commit atrocities if they lead to stability. He wasn't advocating cruelty, he was recording reality. Like a surgeon describing an amputation, not celebrating it. The message? Don't confuse the mirror for the monster. Machiavelli didn't invent ruthlessness. He just stopped pretending it didn't exist. And that makes his philosophy not wicked, but useful. What do tyrants, CEOs, and revolutionary leaders have in common? According to Machiavelli, just one thing. They act when others hesitate. He saw power not as something granted, but something seized. Waiting for the perfect moment, that's a luxury the powerful can't afford. His leaders weren't saints, they were surgeons of opportunity. They moved decisively, even if the outcome was uncertain, because to him, hesitation was deadlier than risk. It's not luck that builds empires, it's movement. So here's the brutal truth. In the game of power, the passive get ruled. If you're waiting for a crown to be handed to you, you'll die waiting. Now let's talk about the question that splits history down the middle. Is it better to be loved or feared? Machiavelli didn't flinch. He said fear is more reliable. Love is fickle, fear sticks. But, and this is key, he wasn't promoting cruelty. He warned rulers to avoid being hated. There's a difference. Respect born of fear can stabilize a kingdom, but resentment, that burns it down from within. So no, he didn't advise tyranny. He advised control, because when a leader's popularity fades, fear, carefully managed, keeps chaos at bay. It's not about terror, it's about predictability. And for Machiavelli, predictability was the currency of power. Strength or subtlety? For Machiavelli, the answer was always both. He believed a great ruler must be a lion to intimidate and a fox to outwit. Force alone might win a battle, but cunning wins the game. A leader who relies only on muscle is predictable, easy to counter. But one who blends raw power with strategic deception, that's a nightmare to defeat. In the real world, success often comes not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. So here's your tactical blueprint. Be dangerous, but never obvious. The lion scares the enemy, the fox sets the trap. Can morality and leadership coexist? Machiavelli thought, sometimes, but he didn't trust good intentions. He argued that rulers obsessed with virtue would be eaten alive by those willing to bend the rules. To him, a prince didn't have the luxury of philosophical purity. If survival demanded cruelty, it was cruelty that preserved peace. A paradox? No, just politics. He wasn't saying morality is useless. He was saying it's situational. The uncomfortable takeaway: if you play by idealistic rules in a ruthless game, you lose, fast. Leading well, he warned, often means looking bad. And history rarely punishes the victorious. Now here's one of his most provocative metaphors. Fortune is a woman and she favors the bold. To Machiavelli, fate wasn't fixed. It was chaotic, like a river that floods at random. But even floods can be channeled with preparation. And fortune? She rewards those who take decisive action. Those who hesitate, who wait for conditions to be perfect, are left drowning. This isn't poetic flair, it's a strategy for life. In uncertain times, fortune favors the aggressive, not the careful. If you want to shape the outcome, you have to strike before the moment slips. What most people miss is that Machiavelli didn't just write about princes, he also wrote about republics. And in Discourses on Livy, he actually praised republics more than monarchies. He believed that while strong rulers rise quickly, they fall just as fast. But a republic, it balances competing interests. It creates systems that outlast any one leader. That's the twist. The so-called father of authoritarian thinking was, in many ways, a political pluralist. His real obsession wasn't tyranny, it was stability. And for long-term strength, institutions beat individuals every time. But what happens once power is won? That's where the real danger begins. Machiavelli said keeping power requires a different skill set entirely. First, eliminate rival threats, harshly if needed. Second, keep the people content, or at least distracted. Third, shape public perception like a sculptor. A leader who neglects even one of these pillars risks losing everything. Because gaining power is like catching a flame, but keeping it, that's the art of keeping it from burning you. So rule like your enemies are always watching, because they are. Strangely, some of his most famous quotes? Total fakes. The end justifies the means. Never appears in his work. It is better to be feared than loved. Only if you can't be both. Over centuries, Machiavelli was caricatured, quoted out of context, and weaponized by leaders to justify atrocities he never endorsed. So here's the truth bomb. If you want to understand Machiavelli, read him, not just his reputation, because the myth is louder, but the text is smarter. Still, there's a reason tyrants quote him. From Napoleon to Stalin to modern autocrats, Machiavelli's name gets pulled out whenever leaders want to justify hard decisions. But here's the catch. Most of them misunderstood him. They heard manipulate, but ignored manage perception. They embraced force, but forgot restraint. That's the danger of half-reading Machiavelli. You end up thinking brutality is brilliance. It's not, it's just lazy. His real advice was complex. Power used stupidly collapses fast. And yes, modern politics is still Machiavellian. Spin doctors, messaging control, the calculated leak of a scandal. That's straight from Machiavelli's playbook. He'd recognize the 24-hour news cycle instantly. He'd understand why polls shift faster than values. The tools changed. The instincts didn't. Today's campaigns use psychology more than ideology. And beneath all the glossy speeches, raw strategy, just as he described. To win the game, you have to admit it is a game. But what about ethics in a crisis? That's where Machiavelli gets uncomfortable again. He argued that when chaos breaks out, famine, war, revolution, a leader's first duty is not to moral principle, but to order. If that means suspending rights, so be it. To him, the measure of a leader was what they protected, not what they professed. That doesn't excuse cruelty, it explains it. In emergencies, values cost something. The question is, who pays the price? And here's the twist. Machiavelli, the man accused of glorifying tyranny, actually gave us the secret to lasting influence. It wasn't wealth, not rank, not charisma. It was clarity. He saw politics clearly and described it without euphemism. That honesty, ruthless though it may be, earned him a legacy deeper than gold. Want to build something that lasts? Tell the truth no one wants to say. That's what history remembers. But here's the trap. Misuse his ideas, and you become a villain, or worse, a joke. Those who imitate Machiavelli without understanding him fall flat. They copy the cruelty, skip the wisdom, and end up imploding. Because Machiavellian thinking only works when it's precise. Context matters, timing matters. If you wield strategy like a blunt instrument, you don't look powerful, you look desperate. Strategy without nuance, that's just theater. Machiavelli didn't invent evil. He just refused to look away from it. He told rulers to prepare, not to pretend. And in that brutal honesty, He gave generations a gift, not a manual for monsters, but a mirror for leaders, a mirror that reflects not what should be, but what is.